Today, we're diving into some of the most advanced civilizations in history. People who built these absolutely massive super cities deep in the jungle. We're going to trace their incredible rise and then try to solve the mystery of their sudden, spectacular collapse. All right, let's get into it.
I mean, just picture it. We're talking about places like Chichen Itza. At its peak, this was a buzzing, cosmopolitan hub, a place of real opportunity that just pulled people in by the thousands. It was, simply put, the place to be. But this metropolis, and others just like it, were holding on to a pretty dark secret.
Because, well, that's exactly what happened. These thriving centers of culture, science, and power were literally swallowed by the jungle. Their temples, their palaces, just left to crumble into ruin. An entire civilization of millions just vanished.
And that is the central puzzle, isn't it? It's the question that has haunted archaeologists for centuries. And it wasn't just one city that this happened to, but a whole network of them all across Mesoamerica. So how did they all end up following the same tragic path from glory right into ruin?
So before we can even get to the collapse, you have to understand the genius that went into building these places. These were so far from primitive settlements. They were meticulously planned urban centers, all built on a deep foundation of faith and a real understanding of the cosmos.
So how do you even start a super city? Well, for the Maya, the answer was pretty simple. You find sacred ground. The actual location of a city was, first and foremost, a spiritual decision. It had to be a place that connected the human world with the divine.
And in the Yucatan Peninsula, this sacred geography was all about cenotes. Now, these weren't just crucial sources of fresh water, especially in a place with no rivers. To the Maya, they were seen as literal portals to the underworld, the source of all life and death.
And a sacred cenote at Chichen Itza, well, that was the big one. It was the most important of all. Experts are pretty convinced the city was founded right there precisely because of this massive natural well. It became a huge site of pilgrimage, with offerings coming from all across the Maya world. And this belief system was baked right into the blueprints of their cities. Caves were seen as the womb of the earth, where life itself was created. So their pyramids, like El Castillo, were built as these huge artificial mountains directly over the most sacred caves or cenotes. They were creating a physical axis, a direct line connecting the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Okay, so with their foundations anchored to the underworld, these civilizations then reached for the stars. And I mean that literally. Their architectural and scientific achievements were just breathtaking, and they were all designed to mirror the universe itself. You know what's so fascinating is how they built their pyramids. Instead of tearing down the old temples, they would construct new, bigger ones directly on top. It's like a Russian doll or an onion. Each new ruler would just entomb his predecessor's temple, adding his own layer to this sacred, man-made mountain. And this just brilliantly shows their mastery of astronomy. El Castillo isn't just a temple, it's a giant functioning calendar carved out of stone. Twice a year, on the equinox, this incredible play of light and shadow creates the image of their serpent god, Kukulkan, descending from the heavens. Imagine the spectacle. It was a powerful way to reinforce the ruler's divine connection.
For a long time, we thought these cities were just isolated ceremonial centers. We were so wrong. Using this new laser technology called LiDAR, which can literally see through the jungle canopy, archaeologists recently discovered 60,000 previously unknown Maya structures around the city of Tikal. We're talking houses, defensive walls, canals. The scale is almost impossible to wrap your head around.
And this genius for planning wasn't just a Maya thing. Out to the west, the city of Teotihuacan took urban design to a whole new level. It was designed to be a perfect replica of the cosmos. A massive city laid out on a precise grid. It actually foreshadows modern cities like New York, but by well over 1,000 years.
So, how do they manage these massive populations and build such wonders? Well, at their peak, these super cities were powered by a potent combination of economic control, religious ideology, and frankly, outright terror. The key thing to remember is that this was a complex machine. They controlled vital trade routes for resources like salt and obsidian. That's the volcanic glass they used for weapons. They had powerful, organized warrior guilds to expand their territory and enforce their will. And holding it all together was a state religion that demanded both loyalty and blood. This quote is describing the Tsanpantli, or the skull rack at Chichen Itza. Ritual human sacrifice was not some hidden act. It was a massive public spectacle. These racks, displaying the skulls of victims, were a terrifying and very, very visible image of the state's absolute power.
Even their sports were deadly political theater. The famous Mesoamerican ball game was often played between rival elites or even captured lords. It was actually a way to settle disputes without having an all-out war. But the stakes were ultimate. The captain of the losing team was often publicly executed as a sacrifice to the gods. So they were powerful, brilliant, and terrifying. They engineered the cosmos and built cities that rivaled any in the world. And then, they fell. And this brings us right back to our central mystery. Why? Well, archaeologists are still debating it, but two main theories have really come to the forefront. One theory points to a massive, prolonged drought that just decimated their crops. When the divine kings couldn't make it rain, their legitimacy just evaporated, and the peasants, who couldn't pay tribute, simply walked away. The other theory suggests the whole system just buckled under its own weight. Too many people, environmental destruction, and intense internal conflict between a hoarding elite and a struggling populace.
And this is where we see this tragic pattern, one that kind of echoes throughout history. When faced with a crisis that threatened their power, like a catastrophic drought, what did the elites do? They doubled down on what they knew: displays of power. They built even grander temples, demanded more tribute, and staged more spectacular sacrifices. It's a classic case of a ruling class trying to solve a huge systemic problem by just intensifying the very ideology that was failing them. One expert calls it a beautiful disaster. At the very moment of their greatest architectural achievements, the foundations of their society were completely crumbling.
Their world vanished, but it left a stark warning etched in stone. It really forces us to look at our own escalating crises, environmental, social, political, and ask a really difficult question. When our own systems are under strain, do we respond with real innovation and change, or do we, like the Maya elites, just double down on the very behaviors that are pushing us to the brink? The answer to that question, well, it might just determine whether their beautiful disaster becomes a blueprint for our own.